Well, hi, Katie. How are you? Oh my gosh, can you believe it? How time flies. And now that we're on the same side of the world, we get to still hang out with each other online and looking forward to November when we have our event coming up in person in Holland, Michigan. So very excited about that. And so welcome everybody to Coaching Conversations with Katie and Kinita. This is episode 4, and we are going to be talking about emotional health and how that is managed with our strengths. So, Katie, how are you doing?
I'm doing good. I'm in school right now, so juggling a
Oh,
lot of things, just like you're juggling all kinds of things. It's lots of different, um, what do I want to say? I'm trying to prioritize.
yes. Oh, I hear you completely, right? Juggling jobs, juggling school on your side. I'm juggling relationships. I'm juggling all my crazy travel schedule. I
Yeah.
had some health challenges recently, so I'm juggling those. And man, it seems like when we juggle so much that our emotions get really impacted, right? Like either for the positive or for the negative. So, as a coach, let's talk a little bit more about that. You and I are both Gallup certified strengths coaches, but we're also well versed in how to work with our clients around emotional intelligence. So let's just start by saying, what is emotional intelligence to you? And then how do you manage it in your story?
I think for me, emotional intelligence is just being attuned to what you're feeling in in life, in your situations, and learning to pay attention to that. So
Mm.
slowing down long enough to notice, to ask yourself the question of how am I feeling? What am I feeling? Where am
Yeah.
I feeling it? And acknowledging that piece and the influence that our emotions have on our day to day working, living, relating experiences.
Yeah, that's great. That's really good. So how do you handle emotional intel? Like, how do you handle your emotions? I guess we could start there.
Yeah, so that's a good question.
We all have to think about that from time to time, don't
That's
we?
right.
It's not like we just get to be coaches and tell our clients how to manage their emotions, but let's keep it real. Like we're both
Yeah.
coaches, but we're also human. So what are some ways in which you handle your emotions?
I think so often I'm surprised by my emotions. I might not always know maybe the depth of emotions that I'm feeling, and then all of a sudden they kind of leak out. And so how I handle that would be slowing down long enough to ask myself, well, what's going on there really? And often I'm asking, what am I believing about this
Mhm.
particular situation? And is it
Oh, that's good.
true? And if
Hmm.
it's not true, what is true?
Right.
So that piece of just kind of trying to notice. Now, I also do things to try to set myself up for success. So I
Nice.
tend to get up early in the morning so I can have a slower start to the day.
Hmm.
But I'm more of a morning person than a really late night person. So while that works for me, that might not work for everyone. And it's more about where do you need that space to
Hmm.
recharge and what are the
Hmm.
things that bring you life, because it's in those things that I think we um, contribute to our emotional health in that space.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's cool. That's really good.
What do
Yeah,
you
I think
think about that?
yeah, I love the way that you said, start your morning slow, kind of have, manage your schedule. I know for me, that's been absolutely crucial too. And starting my morning with just some solid reflection time. And of course, a nice hot cup of coffee,
Yeah.
super helpful, because that does impact emotions as well. But,
Mhm.
I think for me, to add to more of what you said as well, I agree with what you were saying. But for me, it's also surrounding myself with emotionally healthy people, right?
Yeah.
I learned years ago how I would get very triggered by certain folks, and so I was trying to learn, like, why am I being triggered in a negative way by these people or that situation? And I realized that I needed to get to the root of what those emotions were, right? Like the
Mhm.
why is that there? What am I really dealing with? And so surrounding myself with the right people helps me maintain that kind of those habits, to keep going back to those places that maybe I don't need to have in my story. It also helps me live healthy, right? Because who we surround ourselves with also affects us.
Yeah.
That's one thing. The other thing also, and you know me, I'm a big DEIB fan with diversity, equity, and inclusion, and
Yeah.
really helping people understand that sense of belonging. And
Mhm.
so, what I learned years ago, I actually had a pretty severe anger problem. Our kids were young, and just the anger had built up so much, so deeply in me. And then I had to, as I came to terms with what was that anger about, where was it really coming from? Some of that really truly was coming from a place that said I wasn't freely allowed to live authentically in the skin I was given, right? And
Mhm.
I've been given brown skin and I'm a woman and I wanted to, I needed to live into that authentically, but I couldn't because the messages around me were forcing me into certain boxes. And
Mhm.
of course, you can imagine, and we both know as coaches, when people are forced into boxes, they're not able to articulate what they're feeling or address their emotions, those kinds of things. So I took a deep dive into my cultural nuances. I also took a deep dive into strengths, right?
Yeah.
Understanding
Yeah.
what my strengths were. And once I understood those, I was able to articulate what was really making me angry. Some of those things were legit, they were simple, right? Some were deeper rooted in my narrative, and I had to do more work to go there. But then having strengths and understanding that language allowed me a different path to travel instead of that path of anger,
Yeah.
right? And then just I forgot what I was going to say just now, but just with strengths, but then also understanding my culture, right? There are some things in my cultural makeup. I'm East Indian. I was born in India, but I grew up in Canada and then I moved to the US. So having that third culture narrative also had layers of anger mixed in. Now, I'm not saying anger is wrong. It
Yeah.
just is, right? We feel
Yeah.
it. But I started to realize that I was responding to people and I was actually reacting to
Yeah.
situations through that lens of anger. And so just wanting to do that personal work of understanding my strengths and
Mhm.
then also getting a really clear handle on what my cultural nuances were from the three different countries and the environments that I grew up in really allowed me a new language where I was like, oh, I don't have to yell and scream at this person and I don't have to mouth off or, yes, use foul language, right? I didn't have to do that anymore. I needed to respond in an effective way. I needed to own my narrative. And as I practiced that, started to feel that much more emotionally strong and want other people to also appreciate that.
Yeah.
So strengths and culture, understanding both of those really helps me stay authentically, emotionally healthy.
And culture is such an important piece of that when we think about just our emotions and what we're allowed to communicate and articulate and
Yep.
just hold or bring forward with other people. So we don't want to underestimate the piece that that really plays and
Mm-hmm.
our connection with our emotions and our
Mm-hmm.
awareness and knowing um, what am I feeling and how what are maybe some of the messages that I've received either from even within we have work cultures, we have the greater
Yeah.
culture, we have
Right.
our origin, where we've been raised, what was allowed in our families.
Mm-hmm.
So all of those things play into kind of our emotional intelligence and maybe the messaging we've received
Yeah.
regarding
Yeah.
emotions in general.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think, one of the things I was just remembering was often people think that they're so responsible for other people, right? There, I just
Mhm.
threw in one of my strengths of responsibility.
Yeah.
But learning to be responsible for people
Mhm.
is something that gets us into trouble with our emotions, right? Because
Yeah.
then it's like, oh, I'm responsible for you being late or my kids being late,
Right.
or I'm responsible for that project not being turned in on time in my with my company, the work that we do. And I'm not responsible for that. I'm responsible to my employees. I'm responsible to my team, to you, right? To our friendships, to our family members, which means I need to make sure I give them everything. So if I start to get into this trap of emotions, then for me, I'm constantly reminding myself that, nope, you know what? My strength of responsibility can be turned around a little bit. And I need to learn to be responsible to that person, not for that person. And so then I can separate myself a little bit from the, oh no, and the stress and the anxiety that comes with being responsible for someone else's actions.
Yeah.
Any thoughts on your part about that?
Well, I love how you're kind of bringing your strengths into this piece. And I think about how we can have, um, the our strengths are working for us and how they can hinder us in ways. And
Mhm.
so I think about, like, when I think about emotional intelligence and emotions, my number one is positivity. And that is a
Right.
strength that I have to be really careful to harness,
Mhm.
especially in my own life, of not, falsely putting a positive spin on things.
Right.
It's really easy for me to see the bright side, to see how things are going to work out.
Mhm.
I don't have to say, well, now I wonder what the bright side will be. I mean, my brain literally quickly gets
I hear
there.
you. Yep, yep, I
But
hear
if
you.
I'm coaching someone, or if I'm going through something that isn't positive and I'm putting that positive spin on it too
Mm.
soon, I'm not really connecting with the real emotions that are happening. And
Sure.
I think that's when you start to fall into that space where you can kind of, you haven't been honest with yourself about how
Mhm.
you felt about something. And then it can leak out in these ways that are not helpful.
Yeah, that's good. That's so true.
And
Yeah.
so, yeah,
Yeah,
trying to
that's really cool.
really keep that in mind.
That makes sense. And my number one is connectedness, right? So when I'm in a
Mhm,
situation that's either stressful or just a lot going on, my
mhm.
my go-to mindset, which just happens really quickly because it's one of my strengths. Your top is positivity, my
Yeah.
top is connectedness. I
Mhm,
tend to connect the dots really quickly. But what I always have to pay attention to is if I do it too much, then I'm also connecting all the extra stress and the emotions in the
mhm.
situation.
Oh,
And
yeah.
so I try to, in those moments, I'm like, okay, my strength is connectedness. And I think I do it so second nature now, but it's more, I'm highly relational, right? So how can I make this experience of stress more relational than just connecting the dots and also connecting the stress? So, just recently I had some interesting dynamics as we were sharing before we started recording here in town. And it was a very stressful situation, like extremely stressful. And so what I chose to do was give humor into the situation. And so
Yeah.
I had to work with a staff of people, and I started to just add humor. And, they were quite surprised and a little shocked that I was having so much humor in that situation. But I knew that I was trying to, not, I wasn't deflecting, but I was trying to engage with them relationally, even though
Mhm,
I was under a lot of stress and the
mhm.
environment itself was a little overwhelming. I was able to then still add humor to the equation because I was looking at it from a relational standpoint. So that allowed me to stay emotionally healthy, emotionally focused. I continue, it's been a couple weeks since some of those things happened, and I'm continuing to just really evaluate where's my heart at, where are my emotions at, right? So I think it's an ongoing thing. And so for
Yes.
people to remember that just because in the moment you might respond the wrong way or the right way for that matter, there are some lingering feelings that come with any given situation, right? So I love that, Katie, before we started recording, you said, you've known what's been going on, and you just kind of asked me, hey, how's your heart doing? How are your emotions? How are your feelings doing? And I'm like, wait, yeah, I'm still processing. So I think we need to give each other grace, right? Grace and just
Yeah.
encouragement to our friends and our family or anyone that we're even working with, employees, team members. Just that we would give that kind of to ask that question, to say, I
Mhm.
see you, I hear you. How are you doing? When was the last time somebody asked you, how are you really doing? Not the superficial, I'm fine,
Right.
but taking time to help each other build community. You had said something like we're both elephant lovers, so I your elephants in the back reminded me, and you told me what the definition was or the meaning around elephants. Can you tell me again, because I think that fits really well here?
Yeah, I was saying I'm really drawn to elephants because I like that they operate in community, that they look
Yes.
out for one another, that there's this protectiveness
Hmm.
aspect of the elephant community. And so, just as I think about life in general and coaching, like, we're in this
Yeah.
together, we're not meant
Right.
to um do it on our own. And so how do we
Right.
come alongside one another and support one another? And to be able to do that well, it kind of leads
Hmm.
back to this whole idea of what we're talking about. We want to be emotionally intelligent. We want to have and healthy. And so
Mhm.
what are the things that we need to do to promote that in our own lives, and then in
Yeah,
the lives of others that we have the privilege of kind of doing life with, and that's
yeah,
that
that's
piece.
really
But
good.
you also are attracted to elephants, you said.
I love
Yeah.
elephants. I even have a tattoo on my arm here for an elephant because I've always loved elephants. They've always been a really integral part of my own personal story. So I love that it highlights that living, that sense of community.
Mhm.
And I think to maintain emotional health, we need to be in authentic communities, right?
Yes.
So that
Yeah.
people can feel that bonding, that connectedness, that sense of belonging. And that's why, as a DEIB um, practitioner as well, I'm really intentional on
Mhm.
helping people understand how to build inclusive teams and how to appreciate your own self to be inclusive, right? To be an inclusive leader, because then that also impacts people's emotional health. When
Yeah.
someone feels like they belong, they might not necessarily fit. That's a whole other conversation. But if they feel like they belong, they're going to produce more, they're going to feel more engaged, they're going to just feel better. I mean, you and I both know in experiences that we've had in our own stories, in those moments where we felt like we belong, we just feel that much more healthier, maybe
Mhm.
stronger, maybe more apt to use our gifts and our strengths and our talents, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that just paints a picture of emotional health, and I think we need it in this day and age. It's last year I was I had come to the US for a vacation, and I broke my leg. Imagine that, all these trips to the US. But I broke my leg, but it was a gift in disguise, believe it or not, because I was able to just sit, of course, keep my leg elevated, and I did a lot of writing and I did a lot of content creation for the courses that I'm building, and I built what's called the leadership coaching program because I was seeing all around me leaders that are emotionally unhealthy.
Mhm.
It seemed like across the board, many people are being impacted by the situations in our world today. And I'm not minimizing those situations. And I'm definitely not minimizing the pain that people are feeling. But when people are in leadership positions,
Mhm.
it started to be very clear that many of these leaders that were falling, right, in different,
Mhm.
whether corporate, whether it was nonprofits, across the globe, we were hearing stories of leaders that were not maintaining integrity or even their professionalism, but it was their emotions that got the better of them. And whether it was, just whatever the outcomes were, I was seeing so many leaders that were not emotionally healthy. That seemed to be the bottom line of all of it.
Mhm.
And so I built this program called the Leadership Coaching Program, and people can read more about it at my website, semaglobalconsulting.com. But it's a very valuable tool that I really believe individuals could use, whether it's done in a group setting, because we need to learn how to interact with one another in healthy ways
Mhm.
and in vulnerable ways, right? Um,
Mhm.
can you talk to me a little bit about how, when you've worked with clients, why is being emotionally healthy important? I mean, it kind of feels like a no-brainer, but
Mhm.
what have you experienced in your coaching career with that in mind?
Well,
Why
I
is it
think
important?
from a personal standpoint, you first of all, it's you're never going to perfectly be in this
100%.
space of like I've
Agreed.
arrived, check the
Agreed.
box. Like,
Agreed.
so I say it from a place of like
Yeah.
always practicing
Yeah.
emotional health or intelligence. So having that self-awareness
Mhm.
of where am I? So if I'm meeting with a client, um, trying to pay attention and come with a spirit of curiosity, not necessarily I have all the answers, but where are they?
Yeah.
And what is it that they're wanting to share that particular day? And
Mhm.
then whatever they're sharing, how is that really, how am I receiving that? And having an
Yeah.
awareness around that. So partly so I'm not, if I'm getting activated by what they're saying, that I am not pushing whatever my thoughts or emotions are onto them. Like I don't
Right.
want to be making my things their things, and but
Right.
really trying to hear what they're actually saying. So I think in that
Mhm.
space, that's why we want to know,
Yeah.
for each of us, whether you're a coach or not a coach, is
Right.
just, okay, where am I today and how am I showing
Yeah.
up? And you can, if you're in a kind of an activated defensive space, then if
Uh-huh.
I say something to you, that's the filter it goes through.
Exactly. Right,
Versus
right, right.
if I'm in this space where I'm much more open-handed, or and I'm kind of the benefit of the doubt, I don't think you're against me, you know, or that the world
Right,
is against me. If I'm more of
right.
like, okay, we're all doing the best that we can do,
Yeah.
then if you say something that is, maybe it bumps up against me and I'm sort of offended, I can process that in a more realistic way if
Mhm.
I say, oh, wait a minute, like, let me think about who's Kinita and what's her heart and where is she
Right,
coming from.
right.
But I can't do that if I'm not in an emotionally healthy space, you
100%
know?
agree.
So
100%.
yeah. And so
I've
I
talked,
think
yeah.
you begin to see that, right, as we interact with one another. And we can think about that.
Mhm.
Like if we have a day where we're in a bad mood, then pretty much it's almost like it just gets replicated.
Yeah,
Everything
yeah.
goes wrong. It's
Yeah,
just
yeah.
blowing
That's
up.
so true. It's like, all right, I'm putting myself in a timeout.
That's right. Well, that's not a bad idea.
Yeah,
Sometimes
true,
we just
true.
need to kind of
There you
step
go.
back and say, I'm just going in a little timeout. I remember when my kids were
Yes.
younger, that there would be this, I might wake up, I'm in a bad mood. And then all of a sudden, all my kids had a bad mood. And I would be so aggravated because I thought, this is
Mm.
my bad mood. I don't want it to be about you.
Yeah, that's right. Let me have my own bad mood, please.
That's right. But as I reflect back on that, I think it is sort of, it's just as easy if we're smiling and
Yeah,
encouraging, then we pass that along versus, which is not necessarily emotional health, but I'm just thinking about
you're right.
in that space, like how we're feeling and what we're, the energy that we kind of
Mhm,
put out towards people does get
mhm.
reflected back, good and bad.
It does. It does. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And I was thinking as you were talking about that, the idea that I'm not remembering who the author is. You might be able to tell me, but
Okay.
she said people aren't going to remember what you said. They're going to remember how you made them feel.
Oh yeah, I know that
Ah,
quote. I don't know
oh,
that
it's
book
Maya
either.
Angelou. Maya
Oh,
Angelou. There, see, memories kicking in. Maya Angelou had said that, right? And I
yeah.
think that's so true. So when we are trying to navigate our emotions, however big or small they are,
Mhm.
depending on our story, I think it's like pain, right? Pain is subjective, but so are emotions. I'm
Yeah.
allowed to feel what I'm feeling, but I
Yeah.
cannot project it on you. I shouldn't. And we
Mhm.
shouldn't leave it on someone else or expect them to process our big feelings, right?
Right.
We need to be able to do that. So I really appreciate her quote on that. Though other quote that I do remember is I have it on my office wall, and it says, "Be the change that you want to see in the world."
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
That's a quote by Gandhi, and I love that quote because it really helps me remember. We live in a very angry world right now. We live in a very hurt world. People are really
Mhm.
hurt, and there's a lot going on, and it's all real stuff. But why add to that? Why
Yeah.
not be the change I want someone else to
Yeah.
experience? Like work on that heart issue that I might have so that I can be the best support and encouragement to people around me.
Yeah.
Right. So, and then I love how you also said you were talking about how it is your own bad mood and you don't want to give to someone else. But it kind of reflects this other idea of we can't give what we don't have.
Yeah.
And
Very much
so
so. Yeah.
yeah. So what I'm hearing you say is that you're working on your emotions, and then it's from
Mhm.
that place you're going to give that
Yeah.
person that hope, that encouragement, that support, right? And as coaches, I think that's absolutely crucial for us to really get a handle, not be perfect. We're not perfect,
Yeah.
but get a stronger handle on what those emotions are, how we're dealing with them, and then hand them forward. I remember working with a client years ago who was a therapist actually, and she
Mhm.
came to me for coaching. And she said, we were talking about a particular strategy. And she said, well, that's good for my clients, but I don't use it. Well, needless to say, I was cringing inside because I'm like, no, we can't be teaching clients something when we're not willing to do it ourselves.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
man, so here's to staying emotionally healthy
Yeah.
as you go on in your journey. Any closing comments you'd like to make?
Yeah. I just think that's kind of the benefit of working with a coach is it's a
Uh-huh.
space where you can be honest about what you are feeling
Yeah.
and um to walk with someone else to help you put things in proper perspectives and think about strategies of how to move forward and how to
Mhm.
address different challenges you might be facing in life. I mean, a coach is a great um, partner to have
Yeah.
in that space.
High
Yeah.
five. I hear you. We're a little biased, but I hear
That's
you.
right. That's right.
Thanks, Katie. It's always a pleasure to chat with you. I think for
Thank
me,
you.
closing out would be just to encourage folks to really address your emotions, find out where you are in terms of understanding what those emotions are, where they're coming from, and do you need to partner with a coach or a therapist, to kind of work through those. But definitely big takeaway, which we're passionate about, right, Katie, is
Yes.
strengths, understanding your strengths to kind of aim those strengths towards your emotions and in those situations that
Yeah.
might take you on a negative path, right? So, yeah, this was wonderful. Thank you so much. I'm
Awesome.
excited about our next topic. We'll
Me
know
too.
next week what that topic is. So, have
Yeah.
a great rest of your day, Katie. We'll talk soon. And thank you, everybody. Be sure to follow us on YouTube at SEMA Global, or I think it's Kinita Scripsma channel, or SEMA Global Consulting. Can't remember the name. We've worked on a lot of projects together, so do check us out. And we hope to chat with you again soon. Take care, Katie. Bye-bye.
Awesome. You too.